This is Special Prosecutor Larry Klayman.
I'm the only lawyer ever to obtain a court ruling that a president of the United States committed a crime.
For truth. For competition.
As a young lawyer, I helped break up AT&T. That's why you have all your cell phones today.
For sovereignty. For the Republic.
I'm the guy who, at Judicial Watch, which I founded, uncovered the Chinagate scandal. Millions of dollars going to the Clinton campaign, corrupting our political system.
For the privacy of citizens.
And I'm the only guy to have enjoined the National Security Agency from mass surveillance on hundreds of millions of Americans.
Tearing it up.
I'm the son of meat packers in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. I know how to slice and dice.
Bringing it back.
We're going to take this country apart and put it back together again in the way envisioned by our founding fathers.
It's not just talk.
We're not just regurgitating news stories. Larry Klayman, special prosecutor, is making the news.
And now, here's Larry.
Welcome to this week's edition of Special Prosecutor with Larry Klayman. A very historic week with regard to the confirmation of Judge Brett Kavanaugh before the U.S. Supreme Court. A historic week because we have to put this all in context in terms of what's been going on in the country as a general rule, as a general outrage, as, again, general tragedy. Because what happened with Judge Kavanaugh is symptomatic of virtually every other aspect of our body politic. And we're going to have Armstrong Williams on as our guest, a famous talk show host, a friend of mine, later on in the show. And we're going to talk a little bit more philosophically. But right now, I want to talk mechanically because, as you know, I've been a lawyer toiling in our legal system, maybe toiling in the toilet of our legal system now for 41 years. And I was sworn in on December 7th, 1977, to the bar in Florida. Ironically, that was Pearl Harbor Day. I didn't really fully understand what was about ready to happen in terms of an attack on the legal system at that point. And I went through various incantations in my career. First, I was a personal injury defense lawyer, then a product liability defense lawyer. I left that law firm in Miami where I was practicing at the time, Blackwell and Walker. I then joined the Justice Department in Washington, D.C. Its antitrust division. I represented several federal agencies, both as a prosecutor, as a defense lawyer. I also helped break up the AT&T, the telephone monopoly, which is why, as we say at the outset of the show, we have all the competition we have today. I was in the antitrust division on the trial team. I left. I went with a small international trade law firm, a boutique, that his philosophy was free trade. That remains my philosophy, although I think President Trump's doing the right thing in using protectionist tools to get free trade. At this point in time, you have to be tough, and the president is doing an excellent job. And then I started my own law firm in 1983, the law office of Larry E. Klayman, which I changed the name to Klayman and Associates. And seeing all of the injustice and the corruption and, frankly, how judges were making decisions not on the basis of the merits, but on who you were or how could get their careers advanced with higher appointments, particularly on the federal bench, and seeing how money was influencing decision-making in every aspect of our political and legal world, I conceived of Judicial Watch and founded it on July 29th, 1994. And I've continued to practice as a private lawyer, as well as being the head then of Judicial Watch. Later, I ran for the U.S. Senate in Florida. I didn't win. It was the wrong time. In any event, I left that political arena and started Freedom Watch in 2004, which is what I run today. I conceived of that as well. And as I've said many times, Freedom Watch does what Judicial Watch used to do when I ran Judicial Watch. We bring hard-hitting cases. We have citizens' grand juries. We're moving the citizens' grand jury we currently have to Orange County, save costs, and also because we have a lot of really good volunteers there that can get the job done. Robert Mueller, Rosenstein, the Deputy Attorney General, and others are high on our legal hit list to have them indicted, convicted, sentenced, and then to petition the president to have them put in the slammer, which is where they belong. We'll get to Hillary Clinton. We'll get to the Obamas. We'll get to the George Soroses shortly after that. But it's important to understand in the context of this vicious, out of control, frankly, Bolshevik-style attack on Judge Kavanaugh, exactly what the politics are and exactly what the federal judiciary is about. Because, first of all, as you know, I was not a big fan of Judge Kavanaugh. He doesn't have a great respect for the Fourth Amendment. He rubber-stamped mass surveillance against hundreds of millions of Americans when he was on the D.C. Circuit Appellate Court. He's a product of the insider elite group in Washington, D.C. That's why everybody says, Brett, he's my friend. He knows everybody. Why did he buy tens of thousands of baseball tickets to the Washington Nationals? Because he's been lobbying for this job basically for the last 20 years. And this is not the kind of person I want to see on the bench, because I want to see somebody who's more independent, who isn't part of that Washington elite, who is not part of the club. You know, when I ran for the Senate, I said, I don't want to be part of the Senate club. I want to take a club to the U.S. Senate. But that being said, this is the nature of how federal judges and justices are chosen. It's a weakness in our system. They're very, very political. They're politicians in robes. And they do what they think they have to do to either return the favor to those who put them in power, meaning the president and senators from that person's state. In the case of Kavanaugh, even broader than that. But they also do it thinking that they might get a higher appointment if they write the right decisions. And Kavanaugh is, in fact, getting that. He's going to be a justice of the U.S. Supreme Court. It's all come true, a dream come true. But he's been attacked viciously. He's been attacked unfairly. He's been attacked by radical elements of the Me Too movement, radical atheists, radical pro-illegal immigrant groups, radical pro-Islamic groups, and leftist forces on the Christian and Jewish left, who frankly are not religious at all. They're irreligious. They believe the government is God, that their God, which they profess to believe in, really comes second to the government. And this is what, we dealt with here. And if there's a silver lining to this whole thing, it's that this massive onslaught against men. Now, there are men who are guilty and they should be held accountable. Harvey Weinstein, Kevin Spacek for him having abused male boys and things like that. Others that have been out there that deserve what they get. But in my view, the overwhelming nature of allegations such as Judge Kavanaugh faced, which you see in family court all the time from disaffected spouses and wives and others, played by sleazy divorce lawyers, custody lawyers, and the like. This has been going on for a long time. Is that any accusation that's made against a man sticks. Even the leftist law professor, Alan Dershowitz, has said this has become McCarthyism on the left. It's sexist McCarthyism in reverse, with men being less than equal citizens. And if nothing else happened with this Kavanaugh confirmation, and again, I don't think he's the best pick that President Trump could have made. President Trump, who I love and I think is doing a fantastic job, took bad advice from the Federalist Society, in my opinion, took bad advice from the American Conservative Union, which run by Matt Schlapp, are just a bunch of lobbyists. I mean, forget that guy. I mean, he's a complete fraud, in my opinion. And he just caters to that Republican establishment. He even opposed Trump initially until Trump won. And then he became the great friend of President Trump and got his wife, Mercedes, inside the White House with a plum job. And this kind of advice from Don McGahn, the White House counsel, who is part of this Washington elite Republican establishment club, that's why we have Kavanaugh. But again, the silver lining here is this has now discredited the radical elements of the Me Too movement. There are legitimate elements of that movement. I support it, as a matter of fact. Not Me Too, but I support women who have been sexually abused. I support women who, because they should have equal rights to men. But men have been the persecuted minority, as you can see during the Kavanaugh confirmation hearings in general. So I think that this is going to level the playing field. And although we're going to have a Supreme Court justice who was not my first pick, I'm really happy that he is going to be confirmed. It's too late for President Trump to have somebody else appointed and get him through. If the Democrats take control of the House of Representatives and maybe even the Senate in the next election, the midterm elections this November, the next appointed pick of President Trump would be watered down. Probably wouldn't even be a conservative. It would be someone slightly right of center, a kind of a George W. Bush judge. I mean, I got to tell you, George W. Bush appointed some of the worst judges next to Clinton and Obama that I've experienced. So this is where we stand today. I want people to understand something about the legal system and read my column tonight at WND.com. It's running this weekend. It puts everything in context with the Supreme Court. These 9 justices are politicians. They're politicians in robes. They know where the wind blows. You can almost predict with absolute certainty how they're going to rule based on who appointed them. And in fact, they do rule that way. Our justice system should not be that way. I'm a purist. I'm an ideologue. And this is what we're up against all the time. And they have a case in front of them right now. It's the case that Sean Smith and Ty Woods' parents, Charles Woods and Patricia Smith, brought against Hillary Clinton for wrongful death and defamation, because Hillary Clinton, by using an unsecure private email server, gave up the coordinates of Ambassador Chris Stevens, which resulted in the deaths of our heroic sons at Benghazi, Ty Woods and Sean Smith, as well as others. Through her own recklessness and negligence in using that private email server, which we now know was hacked by hostile powers, likely such as Iran, likely Al-Qaeda, likely others. If it wasn't Al-Qaeda, it was given to Al-Qaeda, who then killed our fallen heroes. But for that, these people would probably still be alive today. So I brought a lawsuit for them for wrongful death and defamation. It was assigned to a political hack judge by the name of Amy Berman Jackson. You've read about her. She was the judge. She is a judge who sat over the Manafort prosecution, and she dismissed it on Memorial Day. It was a slap at our clients who were grieving for their sons, and it was to do a favor for Hillary Clinton, who, if she had been elected president, could have elevated this judge to even a higher appointment on the D.C. Circuit, or maybe even the Supreme Court. Well, it went up to the appellate court, and we drew a judge there on the 3-judge panel who actually donated to Hillary Clinton's 2008 presidential campaign.
30.
And of course, they affirmed the decision. They were all Clinton and Obama appointees. Now the matter's up to the Supreme Court. So when I come back, I'm going to explain what we hope to try to accomplish at the Supreme Court with this very important case over Benghazi to finally hold Hillary Clinton accountable. I'll be right back with your second segment and more hard-hitting action as Special Prosecutor with Larry Klayman.
Fearless.
He's claiming he's crazy, he's racist, he's out to kill the Democrats.
Dangerous.
You don't care, he uses the court and the law.
Lethal.
This is bad.
Special Prosecutor
Very bad.
Larry Klayman.
If you'd like to support Freedom Watch and this radio show, go to freedomwatchusa.org.
Let me tell you about what we're trying to accomplish at the Supreme Court in this Benghazi case against Hillary Clinton. First of all, she needs to be held accountable. What we did was file a petition for writ of certiorari for Supreme Court review. Supreme Court doesn't review every case, but because the case was dismissed in a frivolous way based upon arguments, believe it or not, by the Sessions Justice Department, and before that, Justice Departments run by attorney generals who were either totally corrupt or partially corrupt, because she was a public official at the time that her server was hacked, giving up the coordinates of our client's sons, resulting in the wrongful death of these fallen heroes. The judge dismissed it, saying she was immune. Well, she's not immune. There's established law that says that if you violate the law and commit criminal acts, which this was, Hillary Clinton violated criminal statutes, that you lose your immunity. This is a super important case in front of the Supreme Court. Pray that they will accept it and review it. But don't hold your breath, because these 9 justices, which will include Brett Kavanaugh, are politicians. These politicians in Washington, D.C. protect themselves. It doesn't matter whether you're Hillary Clinton or whether you're somebody else like George W. Bush. The unwritten rule is that we scratch each other's backs and we protect each other's backs. So let us see if the Supreme Court does the right thing. So I want you all to understand, speaking Southern, I went to Duke University and Emory Law School. I can talk Southern. And Southern lawyers, by the way, in my opinion, are the best trial lawyers in this country. They get right to the point. And that's why I think that we saw such a good performance from Lindsey Graham during these Kavanaugh hearings. They really know how to get to the bottom line, the way they talk, the way they speak, the way they act. I am proud of my Southern brothers. But this is the kind of thing that will be a test for the Supreme Court. And that's what my column is about at WND.com. It'll be up on our website at freedomwatchusa.org. You can find it at WND.com. It's republished Monday with Reclaim America. And you have to understand that these federal judges are very highly politicized, and they make decisions that not only feather the nest of people that got them their job or that can advance them. Of course, you can't get higher than the Supreme Court. So I'm hoping that they do the right thing. And I would like people to follow this case because it's a case study in the Supreme Court. And I don't want you to think that because Judge Kavanaugh is going up there and conservatives now have a 5-4 majority, that we're always going to get the decisions that are correct, factually and legally, or that the country needs, because this is a flaw in our legal system. I have advocated a different method of selecting federal judges and Supreme Court judges based on merit, not on political patronage, but we haven't had that. You know, our founding fathers were very enlightened by God, but they weren't God, and they made some mistakes. And their biggest mistake, in my opinion, was to create a political process for nominating and confirming judges and justices of the Supreme Court. And we don't have the best and the brightest up there. Not even on the Supreme Court do we have the best and the brightest. I don't care if you went to Harvard or Yale. Frankly, I'd never send my kid to either of those places. He might as well send them to the University of Moscow. In fact, it was 50 Yale law professors that recently opposed Judge Kavanaugh, and he was a top student at Yale, one of their own. He's been banned now from teaching class at Harvard University on constitutional law. These are despicable universities, which frankly are the dregs of the university system, no matter how elite they may claim that they are. But this is what you're up against here. And I want the people to know this. And the most important thing we can do to preserve our republic is to reform the way we choose judges so we get the best and the brightest on the bench. And let's see what they do in this Benghazi case, because Hillary Clinton needs to be held accountable. She's the most corrupt politician and government official of our lifetime. She's heartless. She said, what difference does it make that our client's sons were murdered? And they were murdered because she was reckless and allowed that to happen by using a private email server. She wouldn't even give adequate security to the Benghazi ambassadorial and CIA compounds. So watch this case. It's super important. And go to freedomwatchusa.org. Donate to our cause. We are your Justice Department. You have no other. I'll be right back with the third segment with Armstrong Williams. I want to get his take on what went on during the Kavanaugh hearings. Armstrong is my friend. He's an African-American, so he understands what prejudice is all about. And I think it's going to be very important to listen to his comments. He's a fine man, and I hope that you listen carefully. I'll be right back with Armstrong Williams.
And now, 4 words that make corrupt politicians make wee-wee in their little pants.
Transparency and the rule of law will be the touchstones of this presidency.
But we have to pass the bill so that you can find out what is in it.
Special Prosecutor Larry Klayman.
Be the one who makes our country great again. Go to freedomwatchusa.org and donate.
I want to bring on my very good friend, Armstrong Williams. I've known him at this point for over 25 years. We've been very close. We've been supportive of each other over those years, and I admire him greatly because he says what he thinks. I was on his radio show when he had a radio show frequently as a guest host. He's now the host of the Armstrong National Television Show on Sinclair Network. He's a tremendous talent. I want to get his take on what's been going on in these Kavanaugh hearings and how it relates to our body politic, how the left and others have used race, they've used sex, they've used whatever they can to get their way, which has destroyed, in my view, the moral and ethical fabric of this country. We're at a rock bottom. So, Armstrong, I wanted to have the listeners get your understanding of what's been going on and put it in context of the survival of our nation as a whole.
The Me Too movement has weaponized sexual harassment charges literally against men. It is just being weaponized. I mean, to begin to believe that you can take allegations from 36 years ago where there's a faulty memory, you cannot remember how many beers you consumed, you cannot remember the location, who was in the room, and I'm not minimizing anything that that Professor Blasey Ford may have said. I just think it's mistaken identity. But to take a man who's gone through 6 or 7 confirmation hearings and turn his reputation, his family, into a witch hunt because Democrats want to do everything they can to make sure that he has no chance of making the court because they have this belief that somehow they're going to take over the House and the Senate in November and they can control because they don't want a conservative majority. To do this in the name of fairness when they had the information since early July, all this information, the minority leader on the Senate Judiciary Committee who had recommended the lawyer to Blasey Ford, and even after recommending the lawyer, met with the Supreme Court nominee shortly thereafter, never raised this in any kind of meeting, in any kind of inquisition. And then after the hearings were over, to drop this, obviously it's nothing but a witch hunt. And the president's right. It's a very dangerous time in America for young men. And so it's not who we are as Americans, because you take Lindsey Graham, who voted for Kagan, he voted for Sotomayor. He did not involve himself in those gutter politics because he believed that the president of the United States should have the right to select the person they deem that best reflect their values to the U.S. Supreme Court. And what this has become, it just becomes humiliating, a national disgrace for the American people. It's just a national disgrace. Judge Kavanaugh had it right. And for Judge Kavanaugh to attend an op-ed in the Wall Street Journal apologizing for his temperament as if it's not understood. And tell me any human being whose character was assaulted, who was marginalized, he's made into some character that he could not recognize anymore. He had explained this to his children, who would not have been explosive, sitting there listening to these hypocrites sit in judgment of him.
Well, you're right, Armstrong. And, I don't think you should have read that op-ed. You hold your ground. It's one of the things I admire about the president. He doesn't back down. Call it what it is. Call it a witch hunt. It's worse than a witch hunt. It's an inquisition. And various liberal commentators, like Alan Dershowitz, have said men have no rights anymore. They're absolutely right, whether it's in family court or whether it's in a confirmation hearing or whether it's in the workplace, men are presumed guilty unless beyond a reasonable doubt they are proven innocent. I don't even give great credence to what Christine Blasey Ford said. I don't think it was a question of mistaken identity. I think she's just kind of Looney Tunes, frankly. And
well, listen, I'm not going to minimize sexual harassment and the women and their cry. I'm not going to minimize this, but I will tell you this: this is truly a tragedy for the concept of proof, because we now, in my opinion, Larry, need a law for such that if someone falsely accuses someone else of a sex crime, the false accusation itself is a crime and punishable by the same sentence the innocent person would have endured based on the false accusation. After all, the tenet of our faith, my faith, comes from the Ten Commandments, thou shalt not bear false witness. And this is bearing false witness, and they should be just as punishable if found guilty than those that they're accusing of the act. We need to have another standard here, that if we find out that you're lying, because go back to Sacred Heart University, what happened last year when a 20-some-year-old student alleged that she was raped by 2 athletes, alleged that she was raped by 2 athletes, and as a result of it, one of the kids lost his scholarship. 2 of them lost their scholarships. They were on their way to jail, but in the midst of all of it, she had a conscious moment, and she admitted that she was lying, and she was lying to make her boyfriend jealous. That's right, lying to make her boyfriend jealous. You should study that case. Her name was Nikki Yavino. It was in October 2016 at Sacred Heart, where she knew she was lying. She destroyed their lives. They're in debt, and they still have not recovered, even though she admitted she was lying, and it was all fabricated.
Well, look at what those 2 females did with the Duke lacrosse team. Okay, even my former alma mater sided with them. I mean, disgraceful what happened. And no repercussions. People walk off. In family court every day, allegations are made by wives against men that the men sexually abused their children if there's a custody proceeding. Even if the man clears himself, some have been known to jump off buildings as a result of that. What could be worse? There's no repercussion for the woman who made the false allegation and destroyed the family. And that's the problem that we have.
And what is sad, I attended the rally recently on Capitol Hill and had a chance to talk to Kamala Harris, your senator, Elizabeth Warren, Bernie Sanders, and the city judiciary member from Connecticut. And, privately, they know this is going nowhere. And what they don't want to do in certain instances is criticize the FBI because they're trying to say that the FBI was limited in scope and the week that they had. But that is not true. The FBI was only investigating whether Livio Ford, they could corroborate what she was saying. They were not investigating whether Kavanaugh had a drinking problem and all these other issues. It was a very narrow scope of exactly what they were trying to corroborate. And not one of the people that she recommended, not one, Larry, not one, could corroborate or give any kind of credibility to her story. So what does that tell you? Either she has mistaken identity or she's remembering something that never happened.
Well, that's right. I think she believes what she said. I just think she's Looney Tunes. That's it. And you're right, Armstrong. There are legitimate cases. I'm a supporter of women's rights, just like I'm a supporter of men's rights. And there are legitimate cases. But this has been it's been spinning out of control for many, many years. And it reached a peak with this Kavanaugh confirmation hearing. And hopefully now men can stand up and defend themselves, because I think men have been the biggest problem here, is that they run for the exits whenever these allegations are made, and they dignify them, and they feel that somehow they have to be chivalrous and accept it, and they shouldn't accept it. They should push back. So I think that what Judge Kavanaugh did at that hearing, he did the right thing. He should never have apologized for that. And in fact, I think it undercut his credibility that he did.
Well, no, not really. He has gone on the Supreme Court. Temperament, judgment, fairness is important. He showed just the reason why Trump nominated him in the first place. He's fair. Everyone who's ever worked with him, everyone who's associated with him, talks about his empathy, that his mother, before she became a judge, worked in classrooms with African-American kids and realized they were just human beings, just as intelligent as anybody else, taught him how to not look at people through the prism of race, through their sexual preference. This is a good man, and none of us are perfect. This impossible bar that we're setting is just totally out of control. This is a good man who understands the human condition. It's obviously he's very bright. It's obviously he understands the law. And yes, sometimes we're going to be a little reckless in our youth, but the system is so with the handlers and how you manage this process. I was there with Justice Thomas. Sometimes you can't always tell the facts of what you believe because there's so many other aspects of the process that you must consider in dealing with lawyers, dealing with senators. Everybody has a perspective of what you should and should not say. And I was proud of Judge Kavanaugh when he said at the beginning of his testimony a week ago from Friday that no one has seen this but my wife. Because had he shared it with anyone on the committee or any of his handlers that he was doing this, they would have said no. So Judge Kavanaugh showed us in that instance that he was human and he can hurt and be just as outrageous as any other human being.
You're right. I think he's a good person. I didn't favor him initially, Armstrong, because of him having issued an unnecessary ruling. I've talked about it in prior shows and on your show, that validated mass surveillance without probable cause against the American people. He did that because when he was working for George W. Bush in the White House, he was part of that effort that put into effect this unconstitutional mass surveillance. I didn't like that. But when I saw how he was being attacked viciously, my sympathies went out to him and his family, and I became an advocate. I wish the president had chosen somebody else initially, although I think he's a good man. I think he's a decent man. He's just a politician, and most of them are. So I don't hold that against him. But we need a better system to select judges.
Let me say this to you. I appreciate the kind things you said about our friendship and our history. There is no finer lawyer and no fairer person than my friend Larry Klayman that I've known for ages. And sometimes the things that people malign and associate you with just because you are fair to the president and because you advocate what you advocate, you're as colorblind as anyone I've ever met in my life. You're the kind of guy that I could just go full throttle with if the president nominated you to the Supreme Court. What they create sometimes of us who consider ourselves conservatives, they create this narrative that's unrealistic. It's not who they are. They call us racist. They call us bigoted. They call us anti-women. All these horrible things. And yet people buy into this narrative without ever getting to know the human side and how people contribute and make a difference in people's lives every day, like you have done through your founding of Judicial Watch and what you continue to do through your other causes in the radio show that you have now. And so we've got to get away from these labels. And Republican supporters are just as guilty as Democratic supporters. We've got to get to know individuals instead of buying into these labels and buying into this party loyalty, because I'm telling you, it's destroying the fabric of this nation.
You're right. And even our great Secretary of Housing and Urban Development, Ben Carson, who you were his manager and were instrumental in having him become secretary of that department, he's been attacked as Uncle Tom and everything else. I mean, anything they can use to try to get to you is terrible, and I've been attacked by the Jewish left. OK, so you and I are very similar, Armstrong. We know what it's like. We know what is going on out there. And your comments, thank you very much for that. I feel the same way about you. We are individuals and we need to be judged that way, as Martin Luther King said. Content of our character.
And I don't have to agree with everything that Kavanaugh advocates, but does he meet this litmus test of what is expected on the Supreme Court? And absolutely. And for those of people who say that Kavanaugh is tainted and bruised by this process, so was my mentor and hero, Justice Thomas. But Justice Thomas, 26 years ago, has laid the path of what Kavanaugh needs to do to overcome, not to be bitter, not to be revengeful, and to be a fair jurist. And I'm sure Justice Thomas is going to be a great mentor and guidepost for him on that court when he's confirmed.
Not only that, in my opinion, okay, as a constitutional lawyer and other lawyer, I think Justice Thomas is the best justice on the Supreme Court. And it tempered him for what needed to be done in the future. And the silver lining as well with Judge Kavanaugh, he now knows what the fight is like at street level, because he's been fairly insulated most of his career at Harvard, Yale, all these different very elite clubs and societies. But now he knows what it's like down at the bottom. And I think that's going to help with regard to his empathy towards minorities and everything else, of which he already had. But, every major figure in the Bible was tested by God. And they went through difficult times. I've gone through difficult times. You have. I mean, that's where we are today. So tell us a little bit about where people can go watch your show, Armstrong, because you are a great talent.
They can go to ArmstrongWilliams.com. Go to our website. It tells you about all our shows, where they air upcoming guests tomorrow, live at 10:30 a.m. every Saturday on News Channel 8 here in Washington, D.C. Tomorrow we will be following a live confirmation of a vote of Judge Kavanaugh. And we will be dealing tomorrow, Larry, one of your favorite subjects, the 7 deadly sins.
Well, yeah, let's hope we don't get to 8 after this whole thing's over. So have you on again, Armstrong. God bless you, my good friend.
Thank you.
Before he was a trial lawyer, he sliced him and diced him.
People used to ask me, Larry, what caused you to start Judicial Watch and now Freedom Watch, given the powerful forces in this country that put you at risk?
In a meat packing plant.
I'm the son of meat packers in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. I know how to slice and dice.
A very special prosecutor, Larry Klayman.
If you'd like to support Freedom Watch and this radio show, go to freedomwatchusa.org.
This is the verdict segment of Special Prosecutor with Larry Klayman. Let me tell you what we've got on the horizon, because, see, what magnifies this outrage, this blasphemy, this tyranny that we've seen with regard to Judge Kavanaugh, the confirmation hearings, smearing people, destroying them, harming their wives and children, and everything else, is the leftist media, the fake news media. The president's been exactly right about that. They're vile, they're vicious, they're disgusting, they're dishonest, they're criminal. And we have a leftist media strike force at Freedom Watch. I want you to go to freedomwatchusa.org and sign up for that, freedomwatchusa.org. We need your tax-deductible contributions. In addition to being in the courts and being a gladiator in the courts for you, for our Justice League, we the people, are the superheroes. We need to educate the American people. That's why we have this radio show. That's why I do a lot of television, particularly on Newsmax, That's why I send out YouTubes and other kinds of things, because we need to counter this ultra-leftist, vile media. And it manifests itself in newspapers like the New York Times, the Washington Post, the LA Times, manifests itself at MSNBC, CNN, the social media companies run by ultra-leftists who are making trillions of dollars, whether it's Google, YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Apple. This is what we're up against. They're trying to brainwash the American people, much like Goebbels used to do during the Hitler's Third Reich. Okay, this is brainwashing, and they're inciting violence. And that's why we have lawsuits at Freedom Watch against these social media companies, a class action suit to have them restrained from doing what they do and to take them down financially. A class action could even bankrupt $1 trillion company. We have a lawsuit, this is in my private capacity, for Judge Roy Moore, who was trashed by a number of different leftists and others, including Doug Jones, who won the seat for Senate down there in Alabama, against Sacha Baron Cohen, who, frankly, is a very sleazy comedian that branded Judge Moore as a pedophile. He's no pedophile any more than Judge Kavanaugh is a sexual predator. And then we're going to have a case on the horizon at Freedom Watch for Sheriff Joe Arpaio, my very good friend and client, against the New York Times. I'm preparing that as we speak, for having defamed him and made a number of false allegations. It's time that we put our foot down against this leftist media, not just talk about it. I think the president's done a great service in sensitizing people to just how vicious and vile they are. But let's hold them accountable in a court of law. And, by the grace of God, we drew a Trump-appointed judge, with our case against the social media companies. We drew one with regard to Judge Roy Moore. And I hope that we will do the same with Arpaio, because more and more Trump judges are taking the bench. And I hope that they will be more neutral and fair, obviously, than the judges that we have experienced appointed by Bill Clinton and Barack Obama, with one exception, Judge Emmett Sullivan in Washington, D.C., a Clinton appointee. He's a fine man and he's a fair man, but he's very few and far between. So join us at our Justice League. Enlist in our Justice League. You are the superhero. Support our citizens' grand juries that are starting very, very soon. I pushed it back just a few weeks because we're regrouping and we're going to be even more effective. We're going to begin them in Orange County, California. We'll soon be coming to a hometown near you. This is the American system of justice by Americans, not by political hacks, which is what we've seen, including our current Attorney General, Jeff Sessions, who just testified in front of the House Judiciary Committee yesterday. And hopefully he'll be held in contempt for obstructing justice and not producing documents with regard to the various investigations that have gone on there. But don't hold your breath, because Congress is mostly for show and not for dough. So go to freedomwatchusa.org. We need to ramp up. We need to get bigger. We need the financial resources to be your Justice Department, because you have no Justice Department. And that's why we need you to join our Justice League. I may not be Batman. I may not be Superman. Our female members may not be Wonder Woman, but we are the American people, and that's even better. And for us to bring about justice, we must ourselves create our own system of justice. Because as you can see, just in the last few weeks with Judge Kavanaugh, we really don't have a current system of justice that has any degree of integrity. I'll be back next week with another edition of Special Prosecutor with Larry Klayman. Until then, God bless you, God bless your family, God bless America, and God save America.